So when it comes to Google's non-technical questions in job interviews, on their jobs website, they simply advise you to Google for the most asked interview questions, which, truth be said, gives you a ton of pointers in this sense. But I thought of making a video with the questions that really get asked in these job interviews by simply compiling couple of thousands of feedback within the past year or so, and with some more insight, I arrived to I would say, a very interesting list that you might want to consider in your interview prep. So I'll go through this list from the least asked to the most commonly asked questions. And on number 10, you have a time when you had to meet a deadline. So this is of course a behavioral question, and they are testing your ability to deliver here. Number 9, why Google? And this came a little bit as a surprise to me because in the case of other companies, why do you want to work for this company is a very common question. But it looks like in the case of Google, this is quite isolated. So you'd often find this on the first spot for in top most asked questions. But here, it's not very often. So yes, you should prepare, in my opinion, an answer for this. You just don't spend days to prepare your best answers here. Number 8, where do you see yourself 5 or 10 years from now? This one is again a little bit as a surprise to me, and I know from experience this is music to HR's ears. So in my opinion, this is a good idea if you prepare this, and even if you include it in other answers, such as why Google, for example, simply because you know that will do very well with HR people. Number 7, how do you prioritize your work? So how do you prioritize your work is something that, you know, you have to think of a situation where you have to deal with competing priorities, with something challenging. So ensure that you pick a specific example and don't go preferably hypothetical, like whenever I have competing priorities, I do this and that. No, think about a specific one. Again, it's a behavioral question. Number 6, a time when you failed at something. So personally, I wasn't expecting to find Google asking questions about failure and strong behavioral questions in these jobs interviews multiple times repeatedly, but they do. So yes, you should prepare these failure stories, and if you want a few quick pointers on this, they are looking for 2 things. First of all, that you're being truthful to this failure story, and second of all, whether you grew, how you learned, what you learned from your failure story. So it will take you a little bit of time, especially if you're not used with these things, but failure story is also something you want to prepare for. Number 5, what's your strength and weakness? Again, a very well advertised types of questions, but not necessarily in Google interviews, but they seem to be liking this very much. So what's your strength? What's your strength? I believe it's something you should always prepare for a job interview, because you should always communicate on your strengths, regardless if it's a technical or behavioral interview. But even more interesting, what's your weakness? You might want to also prepare this one. I have a ton of videos about this as well. Number 4, tell me about yourself, or multiple variations. Tell me about your experience. Tell me about your CV. So yes, tell me about yourself. Again, I have a ton of pointers on my YouTube channel, but simply put, you must be prepared, to talk about you in such a way that you drive the conversation your way in a Google interview. Number 3, what's your greatest achievement or variation of this? What's your most successful project? So this is again another gift that Google might give you during these behavioral interviews, because it's expected that you prepare for such questions going in such a high-profile interview. Number 2, what's your favorite Google product and how would you improve it? So this is a classic Google question. You won't find it. I couldn't find it in many other companies. So yes, you should pick a favorite Google product and think about it. Now, of course, the second part, how would you improve it, maybe goes better for product managers and usually these types of roles. But what's your favorite Google product is a question that is very, very often asked in interviews. And last but not least, the most common types of questions that I found are getting asked in Google interviews, even in the past 1 year or so, is how do you communicate in a situation of conflict, or how do you handle conflict in your team, or how do you handle conflict with a colleague, or how do you communicate in challenging times, which is a very, very interesting development in my opinion, and actually the main trigger to make this video, because it means that they really want. So why would someone ask you these questions? Because they want to see how you create trust within such a high-performing environment. It came as a slight surprise to me again, because I wouldn't expect them to be this at the top. I would expect to be something like such as why Google, or tell me about yourself here. But no, they ask you, they are very much interested how you deal with conflict and how you communicate through conflict. So definitely think about the specific situation here and how you, again, earn people's trust in this scenario. So these would be, my top 10 picks. Again, for the questions that are getting asked from people that actually did go through these job interviews. Keep in mind also your Googliness will actually be tested, which is not necessarily a synonym of culture fit, but still it's very close to that. So this I believe would be the information that I wanted to communicate in this video. Hopefully you found this interesting, and thank you very much for watching.